我就露个脸，因为如果我不露脸，直接上视频，我怕他通不过。你别看你是马凯说，这个平台的管理员也不会给你面子的。好，大家继续欣赏。
What the rest of the world does is to look at what China does and then deal with it. And at the end of the day, you will notice that countries have a choice. Do they want to trade with China or do they not want to trade with China? And if you look at the deeds, China today does far more trade with the rest of the world than the United States does. By the way, we do want to have trade with the United States too. But trade, as you know, is a voluntary activity. But it benefits the countries that do it. So you take a country like Brazil, which is much, much closer to the United States than it is to China. 20 years ago, it took Brazil 1 year to export $1 billion to China. Today, it takes Brazil 60 hours to export $1 billion to China. So why shouldn't Brazil have a normal trading relationship with China? So you can see, therefore, the point I'm trying to suggest to you is that if you look at many of the countries in the global south, not all, at many of the countries in the global south, they're very happy to have normal relations with China, and they have no difficulties. The difficulties have come, as I said, primarily between the United States and China for understandable reasons. This is what would happen when you have a great power shift. And I actually think that in some ways, just as what the United States did towards China was predictable, China's responses towards the United States are also predictable.
China is a Marxist-Leninist regime. We can't just blithely say China wants to be a great power, wants to trade with everybody, everybody wants to trade with it. China is not just another normal democracy trying to find its way in the world and to rejuvenate and reattain great power status. It is a particular kind of a political structure with a particular kind of worldview. And I wonder, what you think the proper response to China is. Just let it alone?
Here I want to emphasize that there is only one country in the world that passes judgments on the internal political systems of other countries. It's a very exceptional country. And I think you all know of American exceptionalism. We will not interfere in each other's internal affairs. That's enshrined in the UN Charter, and that principle is used by most states when they deal with each other. So the attitude of most states in the world is, no matter what you choose, we will deal with the government in power. If you say that the United States will stand up to Communist Party's regimes, why are you cultivating Vietnam? Doesn't Vietnam also have a Communist Party in power?
And how other countries, the comfort levels they feel about accepting China's hegemony in Asia, if not in the world, ways, which I think are very unsettling for Southeast Asia. Singapore, caught in the middle, doesn't want to have to choose. Malaysia, I get it. You see in the Philippines flickers of that recognition. Are you comfortable with this? I mean, Singapore is a small little country. How do you feel about that? Yes, want to keep trading, but there are other factors here I think you have to take into consideration. When I'm in Singapore, it stuns me. I understand Singapore's situation. But actually, I think you Singaporeans, and I use you as a kind of a metaphor for many people in Southeast Asia, feel rather profoundly comfortable with Americans. And actually, many people feel rather uncomfortable with China, but it is you don't want to express it too loud because you don't want to rock the boat. I think some would call China's hegemonic pretensions in Asia and the destabilizing effect of that throughout the entire region.
One lesson I learned after studying geopolitics for about 50 years is that the concept of a benevolent great power is an oxymoron. And there's no such thing as a benevolent great power. All great powers, without exception, and this has only been true for 4,000 years, will pursue their own interests. In geopolitics, there are price makers and price takers. So United States and China today are price makers. We are price takers. And if we have any kind of illusion that there's a nice, benevolent, cuddly, great power that will look after you and sacrifice its own interests, then you're in trouble. Because I think to some extent, obviously, you're being unfair to the Southeast Asian states. There are, at the end of the day, 660 million people living in Southeast Asia. has about double the population of the United States of America. Want to learn how to live in peace with each other and can live in peace with each other? Come to ASEAN. Come to Southeast Asia. Please don't be condescending towards this region. This region has accomplished some remarkable things that the whole world can take lessons from. And lesson number one, learn from us how to avoid wars. When I say that the rest of the world has changed, they've become much more sophisticated. They see through all this. They see that, yes, there's a serious geopolitical contest going on between the United States and China. They are very worried about it. They want to maintain good ties with both. It's not just Singapore. If you want a list of 100 countries, I can give you a list of 100 countries that are in that position.
I don't want to think that we are condescending towards Southeast Asia. I think actually quite the contrary, that we try to recognize that Southeast Asian countries are, as I said, stuck in the middle, and I think we understand that. And it's not, I think, the goal of the United States government to push people. But that still doesn't answer my question of China's pretensions, both within China and outside of China, and how you read those, and what you think the answer is as the middle ground shrinks. And ask the Koreans after what happened with the THAAD missile crisis, and they got punished. Ask the Japanese, ask the Indians. I mean, you've seen this, you know this. So how should we respond to this? And I wonder, what you think the proper response to China is. Just let it alone? Pull back the 7th Fleet? Forget Taiwan? Forget the South China Sea? Forget the Senkaku Islands? Forget Philippines? Stop AUKUS? Stop the Quad? Do you think that's the proper response, or what's your remedy?
Well, Rory, this is getting very interesting.
I promise a lot.
I'm very happy to answer the questions. But I'm going to give away a big secret. China is like any other country, an imperfect country. It makes mistakes. And I know, but as far as I know, all countries make mistakes. And it is true that China has had bilateral problems with several countries. There's absolutely no question whatsoever. And you're right, you have the list right. With Japan, with South Korea, with the Philippines, with Australia, and also with India. You're right. That's a list of about 5 or 6 countries, I think. Remember, at the end of the day, there are 193 countries in the world, right? And most countries have problems with some other countries. United States has problems with some countries, whether it's Russia, whether it's Iran, whether it's North Korea, China. So this is normal. And for every country you give me a list, you mention, I can tell you which bilateral difficulties that country has. Greece and Turkey, if you want, India and Pakistan, if you want. So having bilateral difficulties is, by the way, a normal state of the world, right? So it is not surprising that China has bilateral difficulties. Sometimes it manages them well, sometimes it manages them badly. Now, if it is true that China claims all the waters within the 9-dash line as territorial waters, as some people claim that China is doing, then China shouldn't allow any international shipping through South China Sea. But I can assure you, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, ships are going through the South China Sea regularly without seeking permission of China, even though they're going through the 9-dash line waters. When you talk about the South China Sea, it's important to emphasize that the dispute that China has is with 4 ASEAN states. It's not a dispute, as you know, with the United States. And if you look at it, look at the 4 ASEAN states, in one way or another, they've been trying to manage it, whether it's Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Philippines. Now, right now, you are all focused on the current difficulties that the Philippines is having with the United States. But you know, Orville, that Philippines elects one president, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, that moves towards China. Then it elects another president, Aquino, who moves to the United States. And then it elects Duterte, who moves towards China. And then it elects Marcos, who moves towards the United States. Can you anticipate what's coming next? Okay? So, so it's important to emphasize that don't take a snapshot. It's important to see the long-term picture. And at the end of the day, if South China Sea really is that dangerous, you should be seeing wars or gun battles and so on and so forth. But so far, everybody's been very restrained. But I can tell you this, Southeast Asia knows very well that when China comes back as a great power, as it has and as it's going to be, we have to make strategic adjustments. It's one thing to live next door to a mouse, fine. But when the mouse becomes an elephant, you worry about the elephant rolling over.